There is a quiet war going on between men and women, and it does not roar like thunder, nor does it make the headlines. It lives in glances across dinner tables, in the texts that go unanswered, and in the expectations that feel too heavy to carry and too dangerous to question. Every generation inherits this silence, and every generation in some way tries to name it. But what happens when we try to speak aloud the truths that no one wants to hear? Especially when those truths expose something raw, not about the other, but about the roles we are all performing, often without realizing. There is a brutal truth about men, not one they necessarily hide, but one that many women cannot or will not acknowledge. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but because to do so would mean confronting uncomfortable realities about love, safety, power, and vulnerability. Calvin Reid does not offer us comfort. He offers clarity. His work peels back the social conditioning, the polite narratives, and the curated personas. He invites us into the psychological basement of male experience, where ambition meets fear, where confidence is stitched together with quiet desperation, where being a man is less about dominance and more about isolation, performance, and the struggle to be seen for what is real. But this is not new. For centuries, cultures have defined what men should be: protectors, providers, warriors, thinkers, saints, sinners. The scripts were carved into stone in Scripture, then updated for television and social media. What remains unchanged is this: men are expected to bear their wounds silently, and women are taught to see strength in that silence, not the cost it extracts. In ancient Greece, Stoic men were praised for mastering their emotions. In medieval Europe, knights wore armor not just to fight, but to hide their tenderness. In Victorian England, men were idealized as rational and unfeeling, the very opposite of what made them human. And today, the modern man is still being taught to shut the door on his inner world, and often women do not ask him to open it. Sometimes they never even knock. This script is not an attack. It is an invitation to see with new eyes, to question what we think we know, about men, about women, about what we owe one another in the quiet corners of our lives. What we explore here is not easy, but it is necessary. Because without understanding the pain that men carry, the invisible weight of needing to be everything and nothing all at once, we will never build relationships that are rooted in truth. We will keep playing roles in a tired drama, unaware that the script was written centuries ago and that it is well past time to rewrite it. Let us begin. To understand the brutal truth women rarely admit about men, we must first grasp what that truth actually is. It is this, that many men feel profoundly unseen, not just by society, but by the women closest to them. That beneath the veneer of stoicism or confidence or indifference lies a deep and often unspoken longing to be valued not just for what they provide or perform, but for who they are when no one is watching. This truth is not about blame. It is about blindness, the kind we inherit from culture, from media, from thousands of years of social structure. To see it clearly, we need to step back and look at the architecture of masculinity through time. In ancient tribal societies, men were hunters and defenders. Their worth was measured in survival. Strength was not just admired, it was vital. Vulnerability could mean death, not just for the man, but for the entire group. These were the early blueprints. Be useful, be strong, suppress fear. In ancient Rome, masculinity became political. A Roman man was expected to dominate, in speech, in thought, in action. Emotions were a sign of weakness, and weakness was a stain on honor. A man's identity was tied to public life, to conquest, to control. The inner world was irrelevant, even dangerous. By the time we reach the Middle Ages, the role of men has shifted, but the silence remains. Knights were not just warriors, they were symbols. Their armor was not only physical, it was emotional. Chivalry may have spoken of love, but it was love wrapped in ritual, distant, idealized, and one-sided. The knight suffered silently. The lady watched from the tower. Fast forward to the Victorian era, and you find a new kind of repression. Here, the ideal man was rational, composed, intellectually superior. Emotions were considered a feminine weakness. Boys were taught to bite their tongues, stand straight, and never cry. The stiff upper lip became a national symbol, especially in England, but the emotional cost was immense. Men became strangers to themselves. What connects all these eras is not just the expectations placed on men, but the expectations placed on women to accept those roles without question. In most traditional societies, women needed men for protection and provision. And so the ideal man became the provider and protector, but not the partner in emotional vulnerability. This pattern did not dissolve with modernity. It evolved. Today's man is navigating a complex psychological landscape. He is told to be emotionally available, yet financially dominant, sensitive but not weak, assertive but never aggressive. He is pulled in opposite directions, praised for vulnerability in theory, but often punished for it in practice. Consider the modern dating world. A man who reveals too much, too soon, is labeled unstable. A man who holds back is accused of being emotionally unavailable. He walks a tightrope, and often women, conditioned by their own scripts of what strength and leadership should look like, unconsciously reward the very detachment they claim to resent. This is not to suggest that women are the cause. The issue is far older and more systemic, but it does reveal a painful paradox. Men are expected to carry emotional burdens without expression, financial burdens without falter, and relational burdens without recognition. And when they stumble, as all humans do, they are often met with silence or judgment instead of compassion. Historically, this dynamic was enforced by necessity. In agrarian societies, in times of war, in economic crises, survival took precedence over emotional well-being. But now, in a world where survival is not the daily concern for most, the emotional hunger men feel can no longer be ignored. And yet, few systems exist to support them. Therapy is often stigmatized. Emotional education is rarely taught. Friendships can be shallow, and romantic partnerships, though full of promise, often fall into ancient patterns. The woman seeks depth. The man hesitates, not because he lacks depth, but because he has never been taught how to reveal it without punishment. In this void, many men turn to extremes. Some harden completely, choosing detachment over vulnerability. Others become overly agreeable, seeking validation through self-sacrifice. Neither path leads to true connection. Both are performances. Both are prisons. And here lies the brutal truth. Many women, even loving, conscious women, are not prepared to see what lies behind the mask men wear. They fall in love with the idea of a strong man, but not the reality of what it takes to maintain that illusion. They ask for emotional availability, but may recoil when faced with the rawness of male pain. A pain that is unfamiliar, perhaps even frightening. This is not a judgment, it is an observation, and it is not one-sided. Men, too, have internalized these roles. They withhold, they armor up, they use humor to mask pain, work to distract from emptiness, and anger to hide sadness. They do not trust that if they show who they are, they will still be loved. Because history has rarely offered them that safety, even in our most revered stories, male vulnerability is often punished. Think of Achilles, whose grief led to destruction, or Hamlet, whose introspection led to madness, or the countless soldiers who returned from war, broken only to be told to man up and move on. We must ask, what does it mean to see a man as he is, not as we expect him to be? This is not about excusing bad behavior or dismissing the pain women carry in their own lives. It is about understanding that true connection requires us to see the full spectrum of human experience, not just in ourselves, but in each other. And that means recognizing that men are not just providers or protectors or problems to be solved. They are human beings with a history of being told to disappear behind roles. And many are still waiting, quietly, painfully, to be seen beyond the mask. The task now is not to rewrite men, but to unearth them, to dismantle the expectations that keep them performing, to invite them into spaces where their truth is not feared, but welcomed. This truth is not brutal because it is cruel. It is brutal because it has been buried for so long, and it is time we brought it into the light. To truly grasp the brutal truth about men that many women do not openly admit, we need to explore the psychological and social frameworks that shape male identity, often beneath the surface of awareness. These frameworks reveal why men behave the way they do, why vulnerability feels like a risk, and why emotional connection can seem so elusive. One of the most foundational concepts comes from Carl Jung. OS idea of archetypes, universal symbols and roles embedded deeply in the human psyche. For men, archetypes like the warrior, the king, the lover, and the magician offer a map of masculine potential, but also show the dangers of imbalance. The warrior archetype embodies strength, courage, and discipline. When in healthy expression, it protects boundaries and takes decisive action. But when unbalanced, it becomes aggressive, rigid, or destructive. Many men lean heavily on this archetype because society praises the warrior's visible power and control. The king archetype represents leadership, wisdom, and order. It governs a man's ability to create stability and provide a sense of purpose. Yet, a man disconnected from his king archetype might feel powerless or chaotic internally, despite external appearances. The lover archetype reflects passion, empathy, and connection, the emotional core many men struggle to access. It is often suppressed or feared because emotional openness can seem dangerous in a culture that prizes toughness. When repressed, the lover's energy becomes distorted, turning into neediness or detachment. Finally, the magician archetype symbolizes insight, creativity, and transformation. It invites men to explore their inner world and integrate the shadow parts of themselves, those hidden fears, doubts, and wounds that society teaches them to hide. These archetypes provide a lens to understand why many men feel trapped in roles that demand strength without softness, power without vulnerability, and success without failure. Modern psychology echoes this tension. Studies on emotional intelligence reveal that men, on average, are socialized to restrict emotional expression from a young age. This conditioning limits their ability to process feelings in healthy ways, increasing risks for anxiety, depression, and social isolation. Attachment theory further explains how early relationships with caregivers shape a man's ability to trust and connect in adulthood. Boys raised with emotional neglect or inconsistent affection may develop avoidant or anxious attachment styles, making intimacy complicated. Such men might push partners away or cling too tightly, both driven by unconscious fears of rejection. Social learning theory also highlights how behaviors are reinforced by cultural rewards or punishments. A boy praised for stoicism and discouraged from crying learns that feelings are liabilities. This early lesson becomes a lifetime barrier to emotional honesty. Yet, the psychological landscape is not bleak. Positive masculinity movements, informed by modern therapy and ancient wisdom, seek to reclaim the full spectrum of male experience. They encourage men to integrate strength with sensitivity, courage with compassion. This integration resonates with the Sufi tradition, concept of the beloved, the idea that true power arises not from domination, but from union with one's deeper self and others. Similarly, Jung emphasized the necessity of embracing the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, to achieve wholeness. The tension between societal expectation and internal truth creates a psychological paradox for men. They are called to be warriors in public and lovers in private, but often receive conflicting messages on how to do either well. For example, many men learn that anger is acceptable, even masculine, but sadness is weakness. So anger becomes a mask for deeper feelings of hurt or fear. This dynamic can confuse partners who seek emotional depth but are met with aggression or withdrawal. At the same time, the cultural narrative that men must be providers and protectors adds pressure that goes beyond the personal. Economic instability, shifting gender roles, and changing family dynamics challenge traditional male identities, creating what some psychologists call an identity crisis for men. This crisis is not about failing women, but about failing the internalized script men carry. When their traditional roles become unstable, they must renegotiate who they are, a process that can be frightening and isolating without guidance or support. Here, the role of emotional regulation becomes crucial. Emotional regulation refers to the ability to manage and respond to emotional experiences in healthy ways. Men often lack tools to regulate emotions beyond suppression or outbursts, leading to relational difficulties and internal distress. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and mindfulness practices are modern tools that can help men observe their thoughts and feelings without judgment, breaking patterns of reactivity and silence. Journaling offers another outlet for emotional exploration, allowing men to articulate feelings that may be difficult to speak aloud. From a social perspective, the concept of toxic masculinity often comes up in discussions about male behavior. However, it is important to distinguish toxic traits from masculinity itself. Masculinity, at its core, is a neutral set of attributes: strength, assertiveness, protectiveness, that can be expressed healthily or destructively. Toxic masculinity refers to cultural norms that pressure men to repress emotions, dominate others, and reject anything perceived as feminine. This toxicity damages both men and those around them, but the solution is not to discard masculinity entirely. Rather, it is to reclaim masculinity with integrity, balancing power with empathy. This balancing act is reflected in the historical continuity we examined earlier. The stoic man who refuses to cry and the emotionally explosive man who cannot control his rage are both prisoners of partial archetypes. To move beyond these extremes requires courage, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. So when women ask men to be more emotionally available, they are often unknowingly asking men to dismantle centuries of conditioning, to step into unknown inner territory without a clear map. And when men resist or retreat, it is not simply defiance, it is fear. Fear of rejection, of being misunderstood, of losing identity. It is this fear, silent, shadowed, and profound, that forms the core of the brutal truth many women avoid admitting. Because admitting it means acknowledging that love and strength are not opposites, but partners in the same dance. It means recognizing that men, too, carry wounds and hopes, desires and doubts beneath their public masks. It means committing to a new way of seeing and being, one that invites men to show their true faces without fear, and invites women to hold those faces with compassion. In this exploration, we come to understand that masculinity is not a fixed script, but a living story, one that we can write anew together. When the brutal truth about men remains unspoken, the truth that many men feel unseen, misunderstood, and emotionally isolated, the impact ripples deeply through their lives and the lives of those around them. It is a hidden current, shaping identity, relationships, careers, and even society itself. Imagine a man who has been raised to believe his worth lies solely in achievement. He excels at work, provides financially, and appears confident on the surface. Yet inside, he carries a quiet loneliness, an ache for connection he rarely admits, even to himself. This internal disconnect creates tension. The more he pushes to succeed outwardly, the more his inner world shrinks. Psychologically, the consequences of emotional repression and invisibility are profound. Studies consistently show that men are less likely to seek help for mental health issues. Suicide rates among men are significantly higher than women in many countries, reflecting a crisis that is often invisible to society. This is not because men are inherently less resilient, but because the cultural scripts they inherit discourage vulnerability and asking for support. Emotionally, men may develop patterns of detachment or aggression. Detachment can look like emotional numbness, withdrawal, or excessive independence, shutting others out to avoid perceived weakness. Aggression, on the other hand, often serves as a mask for pain and fear, expressing vulnerability through anger because softer emotions feel too risky. In relationships, these patterns create difficulties that are often misunderstood. Partners may feel frustrated by the man's silence or defensiveness, interpreting it as lack of care or commitment. Men, in turn, may feel criticized or unappreciated for their efforts, deepening the cycle of distance and misunderstanding. Consider the example of John and Sarah, a couple who have been together for 5 years. John prides himself on being the provider. He works long hours to ensure financial security. Sarah, however, senses a growing emotional gap. When she tries to talk about feelings, John often shuts down or changes the subject. She feels rejected, and he feels trapped. Neither understands that John's silence is not lack of love, but fear of vulnerability shaped by lifelong conditioning. This dynamic is common and damaging. It erodes trust and intimacy, making it difficult for both partners to feel truly seen or safe. Over time, resentment builds, and the relationship becomes a battleground for unmet needs and misunderstood emotions. On a broader social level, the repression of male vulnerability contributes to issues like workplace stress, addiction, and violence. Men who cannot process emotions healthily may turn to substances or destructive behaviors as coping mechanisms. They may also struggle with aggression or passivity, unable to navigate emotional challenges effectively. Historically, we see echoes of these consequences in myths and real stories. The tale of Hercules, for example, illustrates a hero who endures tremendous trials but struggles with rage and isolation. Ancient warriors were celebrated for bravery, but often carried scars of trauma and loneliness that went unspoken. In more recent history, consider the post-war generation of men who returned from battlefields emotionally wounded but pressured to man up and suppress their pain. Many suffered in silence, their struggles reflected in broken families, unspoken grief, and cultural denial. The impact also extends into men's sense of identity. When a man is told who he must be, rather than allowed to explore who he is, he risks losing touch with his authentic self. This disconnection can manifest as anxiety, depression, or a pervasive sense of emptiness. A man's confidence becomes fragile, dependent on external validation rather than internal acceptance. The pursuit of success or control may mask a deeper insecurity that few dare to face. This fragility is often hidden behind bravado or humor, but it influences how men engage with the world, from career choices to friendships to fatherhood. Without emotional tools and support, men may find it hard to form meaningful connections or to express their needs honestly. The consequences also touch fatherhood in significant ways. Fathers who cannot model emotional openness may unintentionally pass on the cycle of repression to their sons. This perpetuates a generational pattern of silence and misunderstanding, making it harder for future men to break free. Yet, it is important to emphasize empathy in this discussion. Men are not broken or deficient. They are products of cultural scripts that are deeply ingrained and difficult to change. Judging men for their struggles only deepens the wound. Similarly, many women struggle within these dynamics, caught between love, frustration, and societal expectations. Their desires for emotional connection and safety are valid and urgent. Yet, without awareness of the historical and psychological background, these desires can clash with the roles men have been forced to inhabit. The emotional cost is shared, but the experience is different. Understanding this shared but differentiated pain is key to healing. It requires compassion for men as hidden wounds and recognition of women as legitimate needs for emotional intimacy. We must ask, what happens when this cycle continues unbroken? Relationships become fragile. Communities lose the depth of male emotional presence. Society pays a high price in lost potential, mental health crises, and fractured families. But the consequences are not only external. Men's inner worlds suffer in silence, often without language or validation. The man who cannot cry may feel less than whole. The man who cannot ask for help may feel alone in a crowd. This internal suffering can be subtle, but it shapes life choices and worldview. It influences how men respond to love, stress, and failure. It impacts their capacity for joy and peace. The brutal truth, then, is that when men are forced to hide their full selves, everyone loses. But here is the hope. By bringing this truth into the light, we create the possibility for change, for men to be seen, truly seen, beyond performance and roles, for women to understand the depth beneath the mask, for relationships to evolve from misunderstanding to empathy. This hope invites us to imagine a world where men are allowed to be whole, strong and soft, vulnerable and courageous, visible and unseen. A world where emotional honesty is not a risk, but a gift. This is the path forward, and it begins with recognition. Recognizing the hidden struggles men carry is only the beginning. The real transformation happens when we take active steps toward healing, growth, and integration. The brutal truth about men, their fear of vulnerability, their emotional isolation, their need for strength and softness, is not a problem to fix, but a human condition to understand and nurture. The solutions lie at the intersection of modern psychology and ancient wisdom, in practices that invite men to reclaim their wholeness with patience and self-compassion. One of the most powerful tools for change is emotional awareness. For men conditioned to suppress feelings, the first step is simply learning to recognize and name emotions without judgment. This may sound basic, but it is revolutionary for someone raised in an environment where emotions were dangerous or dismissed. Mindfulness meditation, a practice rooted in ancient traditions but embraced by modern psychology, offers a gentle way to begin this process. By observing thoughts and sensations with curiosity rather than resistance, men can start to dissolve the internal barriers that keep feelings locked away. The simple act of sitting quietly and noticing breath or bodily sensations becomes a gateway into emotional territory previously avoided. Another practical approach is journaling. Writing about thoughts and emotions provides a safe, private space for men to explore inner experiences without fear of judgment or rejection. Journaling prompts such as, "What am I feeling right now?" or "What does vulnerability mean to me?" encourage honest self-reflection and create pathways to deeper understanding. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT techniques also offer valuable strategies. CBT helps men identify unhelpful thought patterns, like showing emotion is weak, and gradually challenge these beliefs. Through guided exercises, men learn that vulnerability is a form of strength, not a threat to masculinity. Replacing rigid ideas with flexible, compassionate ones allows new ways of being to emerge. It is equally important to cultivate supportive relationships. Safe spaces where men can express themselves authentically are rare but crucial. Peer groups, men's circles, or therapy groups provide environments where emotional sharing is normalized and encouraged. In these spaces, men find validation, witness others' vulnerability, and experience connection beyond competition or performance. Women also play a vital role in this healing dynamic. When approached with patience and empathy, women's willingness to hold space for male vulnerability can be transformative. Rather than demanding immediate change or interpreting silence as rejection, offering understanding and consistent presence creates trust. Over time, this fosters emotional safety and mutual growth. From a broader perspective, integrating traditional wisdom can deepen this journey. Stoicism, often misunderstood as emotional suppression, actually teaches resilience through acceptance and mindful control of what we can influence. Stoic practices encourage men to face discomfort and uncertainty with calm courage, embracing emotions as signals rather than enemies. Similarly, Sufi mysticism speaks to the union of opposites, the balance of strength and tenderness, action and surrender. The Sufi path invites men to discover their inner beloved, the sacred core that transcends social roles and fears. Through contemplative practices like prayer, chanting, or reflective storytelling, men can access deeper meaning and connection. Physical practices are also essential. Movement disciplines such as yoga, martial arts, or even simple exercise help men reconnect with their bodies, releasing tension stored from emotional repression. Breathwork techniques promote regulation of the nervous system, calming fight-or-flight responses and opening pathways to emotional resilience. In daily life, small shifts in mindset make a significant difference, encouraging men to pause before reacting, especially to difficult emotions, and ask themselves, "What am I really feeling?" creates space for conscious choice rather than automatic defense. Practicing vulnerability in low-stakes situations, such as sharing a personal story with a trusted friend, builds courage over time. It is vital to reject perfectionism in this process. Growth is not linear, and setbacks are inevitable. Men may fall back into old patterns of silence or anger. The practice is to greet these moments with curiosity and self-compassion, not shame or frustration. A powerful metaphor here is that of the oak tree, strong and grounded, yet flexible enough to sway with the wind. Emotional strength is not rigidity but adaptability, a balance of holding firm and letting go. On a societal level, education and media representation need to evolve. Boys and men deserve role models who embody a full spectrum of masculinity, showing that emotional depth coexists with strength. Schools, families, and communities can cultivate environments where emotional literacy is taught and celebrated from an early age. Workplaces also have a role to play. Encouraging open conversations about mental health, offering support resources, and modeling balanced leadership challenge toxic norms and create healthier cultures. Ultimately, the journey toward emotional wholeness invites men to rewrite their own stories. It asks them to embrace paradox, the simultaneous need to be protectors and nurturers, warriors and lovers. This transformation is not about becoming someone else but reclaiming what was always within. For women and partners, it is a call to walk alongside men with patience and compassion, creating relationships where authenticity flourishes. It is about building bridges of understanding that span centuries of silence and misunderstanding. Together, these practices, rooted in both science and soul, offer a path out of isolation and into connection. By embracing vulnerability as strength, men step into fuller presence and richer relationships. By holding space for men's emotional journeys, women deepen intimacy and trust. By weaving modern psychology with ancient wisdom, we cultivate resilience that honors the whole human experience. And so, the brutal truth ceases to be a barrier and becomes a doorway to healing, growth, and belonging. As we arrive at the close of this exploration, it is important to pause and reflect on the profound journey we have undertaken together. The brutal truth women have often hesitated to admit about men, that beneath the surface, strength and resilience lies a complex emotional landscape shaped by centuries of silence, expectation, and unspoken pain, is not merely a challenge to be overcome. It is a profound invitation to understanding, compassion, and transformation. Throughout history, men have been cast into rigid roles: the protector, the provider, the stoic warrior. These archetypes, while noble, have often come at a steep emotional cost. To be a man meant to sacrifice parts of the self deemed vulnerable, soft, or uncertain. Yet, as we have seen, this sacrifice does not make men invincible. Rather, it isolates them, creating invisible wounds that echo across generations. But the story does not end here. In modern times, the script is beginning to change. Men are increasingly recognizing the necessity of emotional openness, vulnerability, and authentic connection. Women, too, are reclaiming their roles not as mere critics of male shortcomings but as compassionate allies, partners in the shared journey of emotional growth. This mutual awakening is not accidental. It arises from a deeper awareness seeded by psychological insight, ancient wisdom, and cultural shifts that challenge old norms. The journey toward emotional wholeness is both individual and collective, a reclamation of what it means to be human beyond gendered expectations. What does this mean for you, watching and reflecting on these truths? It means that you are part of a movement toward deeper self-awareness and relational honesty. Whether you identify as a man seeking to understand your emotional terrain or a woman striving to bridge gaps of misunderstanding, your willingness to confront these difficult truths is a radical act of courage. Embracing vulnerability is not weakness. It is strength rooted in authenticity. When men allow themselves to feel and express the full range of emotions, they reclaim power that no performance or facade can match. They become not just providers or protectors, but healers, connectors, and creators of meaningful relationships. When women meet men in this space of openness, they find not disappointment but depth. A partner who is present, whole, and capable of genuine intimacy. History teaches us that transformation is possible. The ancient myths, the tales of heroes like Hercules, and the real struggles of men throughout time all speak to the tension between societal expectation and inner truth. Today, the possibility exists to rewrite these narratives. Imagine a world where emotional literacy is not a privilege but a birthright, where boys grow into men who know how to hold their pain and joy with equal grace, where men and women together create communities of empathy and understanding. This vision is not utopian, it is within reach. The tools are already in our hands: mindfulness to quiet the mind, journaling to speak inner truths, therapy to untangle old wounds, supportive communities to hold us in our growth. Ancient teachings remind us that the journey inward is the greatest adventure of all. And, perhaps most importantly, this journey asks us to be gentle, with ourselves and with each other. No one expects perfection. What matters is the willingness to try, to stumble, and to rise again. You might consider pausing now for a moment of reflection. What small step can you take today toward deeper emotional honesty? How can you create space for vulnerability in your own life or in your relationships? These questions are invitations, a quiet call to begin or continue a path that leads to freedom and connection. We are, all of us, more alike than different. Beneath the layers of gender, culture, and expectation lies the shared human heart, seeking love, acceptance, and belonging. By confronting the brutal truths, by opening the door to dialogue and healing, we step into a richer, more compassionate world. So, as you carry these ideas forward, remember this: the journey toward emotional wholeness is not a destination, but a lifelong unfolding. It is the ongoing practice of showing up for yourself and others with honesty and courage. It is the recognition that true strength lives not in denial or control, but in the open, vulnerable spaces of the heart. May this truth empower you to live more fully, love more deeply, and connect more authentically. Because when we dare to face what has been hidden, we unlock the greatest power of all, the power to transform ourselves and the world around us. As you reflect on these truths and the journey we have explored, I want to invite you to continue walking this path with us. Here, you are not just a viewer. You are a fellow traveler in the pursuit of deeper self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and authentic connection. Together, we unravel the layers that mask our true selves, bridging the past and the present, the psychological and the spiritual. This channel is a space for honest reflection, thoughtful growth, and meaningful conversations. We are here to reclaim personal power, not the kind rooted in control or dominance, but the kind that comes from mastering the self, understanding our emotions, and living with purpose. It is about stepping into your fullest potential with integrity and courage, beyond superficial quick fixes or empty platitudes. If you find value in exploring these deep psychological insights alongside historical wisdom and practical tools, then subscribing will keep you connected to this journey. Every video is crafted to inspire you to think differently, feel more deeply, and take actionable steps toward your own transformation. You deserve to live a life defined by emotional clarity, resilience, and meaningful relationships. You deserve to break free from the silent burdens that have shaped your experience and to rewrite your story with intention and grace. So, will you join us? Will you choose to cultivate the strength that lies in vulnerability, the courage that comes from self-trust, and the vision that emerges from honest reflection? Together, we can create a community where growth is encouraged, emotional intelligence is celebrated, and personal power is reclaimed. Hit subscribe and let us walk this path hand in hand toward healing, understanding, and a more authentic life. Because this is more than content. This is a movement, and it starts with you.